Podcast odamıza hoş geldiniz. Gerçeklerin odak noktası, cesur fikirlerin ve özgür seslerin buluşma yeri Ahval'desiniz. Bizi internet ve sosyal medyadan da izleyebilirsiniz. Ayrıca mobil telefon uygulamalarımızı yüklemeyi de unutmayın. Haydi başlıyoruz.
Hello, dear Ahval listeners and readers. I am Gülten Sarı from Konuşa Konuşa podcast program. Today we will discuss the Gezi indictment prepared by a prosecutor after 6 years passed from Gezi Park incidents. The indictment demands a life sentence for 16 suspects, including Osman Kavala, Yigit, Aksakoglu, and other figures like Can Dündar, Mücella Yapıcı. Now we will discuss this indictment with Amnesty International Turkey representative Andrew Gardner. Andrew, welcome to our program.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Thank you for joining us to talk about this indictment. For many people, for many commentators, this indictment is seen as baseless, composed of baseless accusations against those people, and it aims to, a kind of punishing the civil society not to take such action in the future against government, because the indictment also accuses people of trying to eliminate the Turkish state, Turkish Republic. What do you think about these accusations and the indictment itself?
I mean, the indictments and the accusations against the 16 people, are clearly ridiculous. In one sense, what the prosecuting authorities have done is to take quite routine activities of civil society organizations and try and spin these as some, wild conspiracy. What the indictment is a complete fantasy. It's accusing the people of things which simply didn't happen and which there's no evidence for presented in the indictment. So I think it's obviously an attempt to go back to rewrite history, to portray the Gezi Park protests not as what they were, which is a massive outpouring of people using their rights, protesting in the first place the redevelopment of Istanbul, central Istanbul's Gezi Park, but also in a much broader way, protesting the police reaction and the attempt to crush this initial protest. It's an attempt to rewrite that history. It's an attempt to, it's basically, an act of revenge against the people who were, opposing the redevelopment of the park, who were connected with the protests. It's an attempt to, it's part of the authorities' attempt to destroy civil society as a diverse group of organizations that can hold the government to account, that can present a different view from the government. But it's also, it has a much larger group of people in its sights in this indictment. Millions of people took part in the Gezi Park protests. Mm-hmm. It's a message to them that, you have to, stay quiet now, or you could face, trial for things you did 6 years in the past. It's also, in a wider sense, a threat, to anyone for what you've done in the past could, can be brought up 6 years later, and you could face punishment. So it's a really serious case that really demands a lot of attention and scrutiny, because what we've seen in similar cases is that they've gone on for months and months without any evidence being presented. Osman Kavala has already been in prison for 16 months. Yigit Aksakoglu has already been in prison for 4.5 months, in solitary confinement, despite his request to be held alongside others. So, I mean, the consequences of this trial for the individuals, 16 individuals on trial for civil society in Turkey, for the right to peaceful protest, the right to organize, and conduct civil society activities, is it's a really a test case. It's a make or break moment for an independent civil society in Turkey.
Mm-hmm. There are some comments that we know that the indictment accuses these people of trying to eliminate the Turkish Republic. On the other hand, these protests are seen the most peaceful demonstrations of in Turkey's history. And these people didn't aim to topple the government, but they demanded more democracy, rule of law, and all kind of useful and beneficial thing that as civil society and the whole society can benefit. So this accusation, I mean, ignoring the rule of law and all principles of rule and respect to rule. So what can you say that if rule of law, which is already damaged by the political authority and the judiciary itself, will be eradicated in the future, what kind of society Turkey will develop, will be in the future? What can you say?
Well, I mean, I think the first most basic thing is that, as you said, the Gezi Park protests were people exercising their human rights to undertake in peaceful protest. The protest was suppressed by, widespread, extreme police violence, which was completely unnecessary given the peaceful nature of the protest. The police reaction is the issue that should have been investigated and criminal charges brought. But, in 95% or 99% of these cases, that no effective investigations were undertaken. It's not the first, Gezi Park case against protesters or the supposed organizers. Hundreds of cases were opened against people for taking part in the protests. The vast majority, ended in not guilty verdicts. Taksim Solidarity, the umbrella group set up to oppose the development of Gezi Park. These figures, including Mujela Yapuja, were on trial. Previously the court found them not guilty. The court, said that the Gezi Park protests were an expression of rights. The fact that this case is coming back 6 years later is just a demonstration of how far, the judicial system has shifted after the declaration of the state of emergency, the imprisonment, the dismissal of judges and prosecutors, the situation that remains in the judiciary after this of extreme political interference and control is something which it's this environment which can result in such absurd and damaging cases such as this being brought.
Mm-hmm. So can you call this indictment and the whole case as a political case?
I mean, it's certainly not a case based on law. Whether you look at international law standards, if you look at Turkish constitution, Turkish law, can be no justification to open such a case. So such a case, if it's not based on law, then obviously it's based on politics.
Mm-hmm. Andrew, have you got any message to the Turkish government about this arrest? Osman Kavala is in jail for 16 months and Yigit Aksakoglu for 4 months. Have you got any message for their release or regarding this ongoing case?
I mean, Amnesty International has been campaigning for some time, and we've renewed this campaign with an urgent call to action for Osman Kavala and Yigit Aksakoglu to be released from prison. The indictment has confirmed that there's no serious evidence against them whatsoever. There's nothing in Turkey's laws that could be justified to keep these two individuals in prison. They should be released immediately. There's, no reason to open a trial proceeding based on this indictment, based on, the information which is being presented as evidence here. So the trial should be dropped. The charges should be dropped. But more broadly, the Turkish authorities have to allow civil society to be able to, carry on with its legitimate and important work. Trials like this are an attempt to silence individuals, an attempt to put an end to an independent civil society in Turkey. And certainly if this very serious, these serious attacks on civil society continue, the consequences will be very serious. So there needs to be an end to these attacks more broadly.
Okay. Anything else that you want to add?
No, thank you very much for your time and your questions.
Thank you for joining us and talking on this important issue for Ahval listeners. Yes, dear Ahval listeners, we talk about the Gezi indictment and trial, which will be start on June 24 and 25, and we will see what will happen, whether these accusations will be declined, will be withdrawn. Thank you again to Andrew for joining us. See you for another program.
Ahval'in podcastlerini tüm mobil telefonlarda Spotify, SoundCloud ve Spreaker üzerinden dinleyebilirsiniz. Apple iPhone kullanıcıları bize iTunes üzerinden de ulaşabilir. Türkiye'nin ve hayatın cıvıl cıvıl sesleri Ahval Podcast dizisinde. Kulağınız bizde olsun.